I'm all alone now," the Apache girl cried when the cowboy found her wagon in the rain. Inside that wagon sat a young Apache girl, no older than 13 or 14, gripping the wooden sides tightly as her tiny hands turned red from the cold. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, dripping with water, and her thin clothing offered almost no protection against the storm. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from the effort of moving the wagon, but from the fear that she was completely, utterly alone. "I'm all alone now," she whispered, her voice trembling as it carried through the wind. She could see nothing but the gray, endless horizon around her. The trail she followed was slippery and uneven, and every wheel of her wagon sank into the mud, slowing her progress. She had been traveling for days since her village had been attacked, and she had barely had a chance to think clearly in the chaos. Her parents and younger siblings had been separated from her in the confusion, and now, without any guidance, she had no idea where to go. Every sound, an animal moving in the distance, the rustling of leaves made her flinch. She felt exposed, tiny and fragile in a world that suddenly seemed enormous and cruel. The girl's wagon contained only a few belongings: a small, worn blanket, a clay pot that had survived the journey, and a handful of dried corn kernels that she had scavenged to keep herself alive. Even those meager provisions were getting wet and muddy, making her feel as though even her most basic survival tools were slipping away from her. Her stomach ached with hunger and her body ached from exhaustion. She had walked and pushed the wagon through thick mud for hours, and yet the rain continued, unrelenting, as if the sky itself mourned her loneliness. As she struggled forward, her mind wandered back to the day she had left her village. It had started as a morning like any other. Children laughed and played near the river while adults worked on their daily chores. She remembered the bright sun, the smell of cooking fires, the sound of birds in the trees. Then came the screaming, the panic, and the terrifying rush of people running in every direction. She had tried to find her family, calling out their names, but it had been impossible. In the chaos, she had been forced to flee, taking only what she could carry in the wagon. Since that day, every step had been a fight to survive. Each mile traveled another test of courage. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, it was hard to tell in the rain. But just as the girl began to lose hope, she saw a figure in the distance. At first, she thought it might be a trick of the storm, a shadow created by the gray light. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was a man on horseback, moving steadily despite the weather. He was a cowboy, his hat pulled low against the rain and his coat heavy with water, but he rode with confidence, as though he had faced storms like this many times before. The girl froze, unsure whether to call out or hide. She had heard stories of strangers who were not always kind, and though she desperately wanted help, fear held her back. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the cowboy, her hands gripping the sides of the wagon so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The man noticed her, and without hesitation, he guided his horse closer, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. "Hey there, little one," he called in a calm voice that somehow cut through the roar of the storm. "Are you okay? I can help you." The cowboy knelt beside the wagon, offering her a dry scarf he had tucked inside his coat. "Here, this will help a little," he said. The girl accepted it silently, wrapping it around her shoulders. It was a small comfort, but in that moment it felt like a shield against the entire storm. He then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out some bread and water. "Eat something," he urged. "You need your strength." Her stomach rumbled violently as she took the food, the taste of dryness and crumbs foreign yet comforting after so many days without proper nourishment. She chewed quickly, almost afraid that the meal might vanish if she didn't eat fast enough. For the first time in days, she felt her fear easing. The cowboy's calm presence, his kind words, and the simple act of sharing food made her realize she wasn't entirely alone. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "You're welcome," he replied gently. "My name's Sam. What's yours?" She had not spoken to anyone in days, not since the chaos of the attack. Finally, she said, "Ahioka." Together, they started moving again, Sam walking beside the wagon to help push when the mud became too thick. Occasionally, he would pause, scanning the horizon for danger. He knew the land well, had traveled these trails countless times, and had a keen sense of when trouble might be near. But he never rushed Ahioka. He matched his pace to hers, making sure she never felt left behind or overwhelmed. As they traveled, Ahioka began to share bits of her story, her voice growing stronger with each word. She spoke of her village, her family, and the sudden attack that had left her alone. Sam listened carefully, never interrupting, his eyes filled with understanding. It was the first time she had spoken openly since her family had disappeared, and each word she spoke seemed to lift a small weight from her shoulders. The storm raged on, but with Sam by her side, Ahioka felt a small sense of courage. She began to notice little details around her again, the dark green of the distant pine trees, the way the rain created tiny rivers in the mud, and the occasional cry of birds seeking shelter. For the first time in days, she felt a fragile connection to the world around her, a reminder that life continued even in the darkest moments. As evening approached, Sam spotted a small cluster of trees ahead. "We'll stop there for a while," he said. "You can rest and I'll make a fire. It'll help dry some of this off." They reached the shelter and Sam quickly gathered dry wood from the underbrush, striking sparks until the fire roared to life. Ahioka sat close, careful to keep a safe distance from the flames, her wet clothes beginning to dry from the heat. She looked at Sam, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Sam smiled softly. "Because no one should be alone in a storm like this. And besides," he added with a wink, "everyone deserves a chance to find safety and happiness." She was still frightened, still tired, but she had someone to rely on now, a friend, a protector, a guide through the storm. The night fell and the rain continued to fall, but under the shelter of the trees and the warmth of the fire, Ahioka felt a fragile sense of safety. Sam sat nearby, keeping watch, and she finally allowed herself to rest, her small body curling up under a blanket. Even in the storm, even in the cold, she slept with the hope that tomorrow would bring a new chance, a new path, and perhaps, one day, a reunion with her family. The first part of their journey ended not with triumph, but with survival, trust, and the faint but unyielding light of hope. Ahioka had been alone for so long, but with Sam's guidance and care, she learned that even in the darkest storms, someone kind could appear and life could begin again. The morning after the storm, the rain had stopped, leaving the plains glistening with puddles and fresh, wet earth. Ahioka woke to the smell of damp soil and the soft warmth of the fire still glowing beside her. Sam had already prepared a small breakfast of bread and dried meat, which he offered to her with a kind smile. The girl ate slowly, savoring the food, knowing that each bite would give her the strength she needed for the long day ahead. After breakfast, Sam helped Ahioka pack her few belongings back into the wagon. Though it was small and worn, the wagon was sturdy and would carry her safely as they traveled. Sam checked the wheels, making sure they were not stuck with mud, and offered to pull the wagon himself when the path became too difficult. Ahioka wanted to help, but Sam reminded her gently, "You need to save your strength. You've been through a lot already." His words were steady and calming, helping her forget for a little while the fear and sadness that had followed her since leaving her village. As the day went on, they encountered travelers on the trail, some going to nearby towns, others moving goods across the plains. Sam spoke to each person, asking quietly if they had heard anything about Ahioka's family. The girl stayed close, listening with wide eyes. Every time someone shook their head or offered only a sympathetic glance, her chest tightened with fear that she might never see her family again. But Sam never let despair take hold. He reminded her to keep hope alive, saying, "Even when the path is hard, we keep moving forward. That's how we find what we're looking for." As they entered, Ahioka felt a mixture of nervousness and relief. She had not been around so many people since the attack on her village, and the noise, the movement, and the chatter made her anxious. A kind woman approached, carrying a warm blanket. "You poor child," she said softly. "Come here. You look frozen and hungry." She wrapped the blanket around Ahioka's shoulders, and for the first time since the tragedy, the girl felt a true sense of comfort. Sam introduced Ahioka, explaining briefly what had happened and that they were hoping to find her family. The townspeople listened quietly, their expressions filled with sympathy. Some offered food, others water, and a few even suggested places where her family might have gone. Ahioka found herself slowly opening up, answering questions and sharing small details about her village. She described the colors of the homes, the smell of the cooking fires, and the laughter of her siblings. As she spoke, the townspeople encouraged her gently, making her feel that her story mattered, that someone cared. Her heart, heavy for so long, felt lighter with every kind word and warm gesture. Sam stayed close, watching over her while she interacted with the townspeople. He knew that Ahioka needed to feel safe, but also that she needed to regain her courage. He guided her to simple tasks around the barn, helping with feeding animals and carrying small supplies. These small chores gave her a sense of purpose and reminded her that even in difficult times, life could continue and even flourish. Days passed, and Sam did not rest in his search for her family. He traveled between nearby villages, spoke with travelers, and asked scouts to keep watch along the trails. Each evening, he returned to the settlement, bringing whatever news he had found. Sometimes there were leads, sometimes disappointments, but Sam never let Ahioka see despair. Instead, he reminded her that every step, even a small one, was progress. Meanwhile, Ahioka began to build small friendships in the settlement. She played simple games with other children, shared stories by the fire, and even learned a few new skills, like helping to mend clothes and cook small meals. These activities, though ordinary, helped her feel like a child again, not just a scared girl running through storms. Each smile, each laugh, made the dark memories of the attack a little less overwhelming. One afternoon, Sam returned with exciting news. Scouts had seen a family matching Ahioka's description in a valley several days' ride from the settlement. Her heart leapt with hope, and she could hardly contain her excitement. Sam prepared the wagon and packed food for the journey. Though the path would be long and tiring, Ahioka was ready. The thought of seeing her family again gave her strength she did not know she had. They traveled together, Sam guiding the wagon carefully through the rough terrain, and Ahioka walking beside him, helping when she could. The land changed as they moved closer to the valley, with higher hills, thicker trees, and the sound of a river growing louder. The air felt fresher here, and Ahioka's spirits lifted with every step. She began to imagine the moment she would see her parents and siblings, imagining the smiles, the tears, and the hugs she had longed for. Finally, as the sun began to sink behind the distant hills, they reached the edge of the valley. Ahioka's heart raced as she saw a small group of people near a cluster of homes, moving and talking just as she remembered her family doing. She called out, her voice trembling at first, then stronger. "Mother, father, siblings." Then recognition sparked in their eyes. Ahioka's mother ran forward first, tears streaming down her face. Her father followed, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her younger siblings rushed into her arms, their laughter and cries blending into one joyous sound. Ahioka fell into their embrace, sobbing with happiness, her heart finally light after so many days of fear and loneliness. Sam watched quietly from a distance, a small smile on his face. He had kept his promise. He had guided Ahioka safely to her family and had ensured that she could feel hope again. Though he knew he would soon return to his solitary life on the trail, he felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that he had made a difference in her life. Ahioka's family thanked him again and again, their gratitude overflowing. But Sam only nodded and said softly, "Take care of each other. That's the most important thing. He then mounted his horse, tipped his hat to the reunited family, and began the ride back into the open plains. For Ahioka, life in the valley slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. She shared her story with her family and the townspeople, remembering the kindness of a stranger who had appeared when she was at her lowest. She played with her siblings, helped with daily chores, and slowly rebuilt her life, always carrying the memory of the cowboy who had guided her through the storm. Even years later, when she thought of that rainy day, Ahioka did not remember only fear or loneliness. She remembered courage, hope, and the kindness of someone who had shown her that even in the darkest moments, light could appear. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would never forget Sam, the cowboy who had found her wagon in the rain and reminded her that no one truly had to face the world alone.